All right, we're live again. We'll try this one more time. See if it works. We're just going to keep rolling this time because the thing will record whether there's anybody there or not. So we're just going to keep on going. I'm going to keep Bart just for a few more minutes, but tell me a little bit about how you got involved in all this. Tell me about your history in the culinary arts, how you started College Market, and stuff like that.
Well, to go in a deep dive, one of my favorite jobs of all time was managing a coffee shop back in Buffalo, New York, where I'm from. Um, and they just really good people, really good staff. It was more of a family in the staff and a big cornerstone of the community in the town that I grew up in. And I really love that. So when my wife is amazing. She's a genius. She's a professor in geology. She's a doctorate and all that stuff. She works with NASA. She plays with Mars. It's incredible. Anyway, so we moved out here for her job, and I saw a place that physically looked like it should be exactly what I wanted to. And after teaching for 2 years at the Culinary Arts School at ISU, I decided to start my own coffee shop to go back to something that was a very big part of my life as another extension of my family, and try to recreate that community cornerstone kind of place that the old Clarence Center Coffee Company was in for my life. And I think 8 years in, 6 years in, I think I'm succeeding reasonably at that.
No, you're doing better than that, man. You got the coolest joint around.
Thanks. Yeah, so it's taking what I learned from the guy that was the chef at the Clarence Center Coffee Company. He was a chef. He created a whole bunch of sandwiches. I took that, went in through my own experiences in teaching culinary arts for 2 years, and then just kind of seeing what kinds of flavors that this area of the world likes and what kinds of flavors this area of the world needs. I'm talking about blue cheese. You guys need to do more blue cheese. It's good stuff. And just kind of presenting that in an atmosphere that everybody can just relax in. And now more than ever, having some place where you can just kind of kick back and relax is important.
Yeah, it's not exactly a calm time in which we live. Uh, so one thing that all of you should know is that the tour of Idaho has a lot of pieces to it, and some of the pieces are obvious, some of the pieces are not obvious. The things that are obvious are the trails themselves, and maybe walking into Bart's place because we made it a challenge point, walking into Chip's place, walking into the Sand Trap or Pocatello Power Sports, or visiting Kalen or Donna or any of those people. Those are obvious because we made them obvious. What is less obvious, though, is there are things that are parts of the tour that may not immediately float to the surface. And I'll tell you this, almost all of the modern tour of Idaho, the way it's existed for the last 5 years, was planned on coffee tables at this guy's place. I'd take a laptop down there. I'd sit down. Bart would come back and he'd go, "What kind of torturous things are you trying to do to all these people now?" And we'd sit there and have a pretty good chuckle over it. I'd go, "Well, we're going to do this." Now, Bart, if I'm not mistaken, has never ridden a motorcycle in his life.
Never ridden a motorcycle in my life. You're right. You keep inviting me out.
But I know he's a shoot all offers even to go with me in a side-by-side because college education has worked with this guy. But anyway, so when I sit down, if I'm not here, I'm at Bart's joint. So in the winter, when it's cold outside, I sit there. Bart's got these big, beautiful windows that the sun comes in, starting around 11 o'clock. And I sit there with a laptop. And when I'm figuring out how I'm going to make the tour work next year, all those waypoints that I put down, all the maps that I look at, I do at a laptop at his joint. So it is an important part of the tour. Just as I was telling you a few weeks ago, Jeff and those guys, Jeff and Kent back in Kentucky, the Cat guys, the Cat back a long time ago when we kind of did something like that back in the late 80s and early 90s was the genesis for the tour of Idaho. So there's all kinds of really interesting things that are woven into this adventure you're going to have. And Bart's place is a big part of it. The coffee shop that I hang out with has as much to do with the final version of the tour of Idaho as just about anything else, and that's why he's on there. Well, do you have anything else that you want to tell us?
Just enjoy it. Like one of these days, I'm going to take the tour of Idaho, whether it's on a bike or just kind of hike my way up to the top. I've seen some of the pictures of some of the landscape that you guys ride through, and Idaho is a beautiful, beautiful place. I'm actually quite jealous that you all going to spend a couple weeks running up through here.
Yeah. 10 days.
Once you get out of the desert, anyway. Good luck with that.
His wife, by the way, she's a volcanologist, right?
Yeah, she's a volcanologist.
Yeah. So his wife, Shannon, his beautiful wife, I might add, very smart, very intelligent lady, really top level scientist. Spends a lot of her time researching the worst area that you ride through when you're on the tour of Idaho. So that burnt over scorched terrain that you spend the worst afternoon of your life in is Shannon's specialty. She spends a lot of time out there. Mm-hmm. Well, you're welcome to hang out here if you want. I'm just going to take some questions from the audience for the rest of the hour. I got a little come to Jesus stuff, but if you need to get after it, get after it.
I do, unfortunately.
All right. So here, one more cheers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, man.
Give it up for Bart.
You all.
Thank you, man. Watch your headphones there before you get out. Cheers. And Megan and those guys will show you out.
Perfect.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow morning.
Take care.
All right. So there you have it, Bart. When you're at his place, you make sure you treat everybody well. You tip the waiters or you tip the service staff there, and they'll take good care of you. Ask for a T1 sandwich, and they got all kinds of cool stuff in there for you. All right. So there were a few questions. I didn't see a lot of questions in the I told everybody basically that I would just answer questions this week because I knew I wasn't going to have a guest for a full hour. I only saw one question, so I'm going to answer it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of time just to go back over some things that are already popping up as questions that at this point probably shouldn't be questions. So I'm not trying to get on anybody's case, but time is really coming short now. And there are a few things that you should have already resolved. So we'll go through those again. But the one question that someone asked this week, I asked everybody to post their questions on the event announcement for this PBR Monday. And the one question that came up was bear spray. How do you carry it? And that's actually an excellent question. Charles Rhodes asked it. And Charles, thank you very much for asking the question. And I'll tell you how I carry it. And the way I carry it is the way that I think most experienced backcountry guides and people that certainly had to use it carry it. And that's someplace where you can get to it really fast. I have a little tab right on my Climb Arsenal vest that I keep the bear spray attached to, and it's right here. Now, this bear spray, it comes armed with a safety pin, and you kind of have to take that safety pin out because if you don't, you're going to find that removing that safety pin takes longer than you would like for it to take when you need to deploy the bear spray. So you got to take the safety pin out, and they'll tell you that. If you read the instructions, it'll tell you all about how to basically arm the can. But when I'm in bear country, I don't carry my bear spray out all the time. You need bear spray basically on day 4, day 5, day 6, day 7, day 8, and day 9. But you don't need it on day 10, and you don't need it on days 1, 2, and 3. You won't need your bear spray. You probably actually don't need it on day 4 either. But so I keep it kind of stowed away, and I keep the safety pin in it until I need it. But when I start entering serious bear country, which is basically Chalice to Wallace, that's when you're in fairly serious bear country, I keep it out in a place where I can get to it easily. They usually come in their own little holster, and what I do is I carabiner that holster to my Climb Arsenal vest, and I practice yanking it out of that holster. I have, and let me get it here. I've got a dummy can, and let me get it and show you. Here's a dummy can right here. I buy one of these every year, and I practice with it. I put it in the holster that I've got, and I practice just dragging the thing out, deploying it as quickly as I can. Most of you know that for Tour of Idaho kind of riding, I just carry the bear spray. But for general riding, especially when I'm out doing sawing and trail maintenance, where I'm off the bike an awful lot, I carry a 10 millimeter Glock, and I also carry bear spray. I carry them both. And I have an external holster for my Glock that basically clips onto the Arsenal vest as well. It's got a quick release on it, so I can pop out the gun really quick. In bear country, I keep a round in the chamber. There's a safety in the holster, so to speak, so that You're not likely to accidentally discharge it in the holster. And deploying it is basically as quick as deploying the bear spray. I would prefer to use the bear spray, but there are some cases in which bear spray isn't going to do you any good. If the wind's really blowing, if it's raining, especially if the wind's blowing the wrong way, the bear spray is probably not going to be an adequate solution. Now, that's the bad news. The good news is for the tour of Idaho, you're not likely to be spending an awful lot of time off of your bike. And the only time I've ever had an unpleasant bear encounter on the tour of Idaho was when I was trying to drag my bike back up a side hill that I'd launched it off of with my rescue kit. I was doing that one day and a bear walked up. Dwayne Coulter, who I think is watching this broadcast tonight, can tell you a similar story about a bear encounter while he was changing a tire. It's when you're focused on something else and the bike's not running and you're in bear country that I think you're vulnerable to a bear attack. The rest of the time, they can hear the bike coming, and you're probably not going to have too many encounters with bears. I've flushed a few out a couple of times, but bears don't like the sound of motorcycles in my experience. And usually when you see them, they're trying as hard as they can to get away from you. Moose, not so much. Now, you encounter a moose, that may be a worse problem than the bear on a motorcycle. But as long as you're riding, you keep going, it's not that much of a problem. But I would start worrying if I were in bear country and I had to stop for some reason. You want to be especially vigilant when you're stopped. And whatever you do, if you take that vest off, let's say you launch your bike off a side hill and you're trying to retrieve it, don't take your vest off with the can attached and leave it 30 feet away somewhere. You make sure you have that can with you. Stick it in your pocket, carabiner it to a belt loop or something like that. But make sure you always have the bear spray with you when you are off the bike. So, Charles, to answer your question, I can only answer it for me. I'm a single data point. All I'll say is that I've talked to many outdoor guides. I've talked to a lot of people that spend a lot of time in bear country, and I carry it the way they carry it. The other thing that I do that they do is I buy dummy cans and I practice all the time. Get the thing out, spray it. Most people are surprised to find out that it doesn't squirt out like a stream. It kind of forms a cloud a little bit. And in order for it to be effective, you got to wait until the bear is closer than in many cases you would like. And if you don't practice this, you're not going to understand any of that. Get the big cans, get the ones that claim that they go out to 30 or 40 feet. Those are the best ones. And when the bear's getting pretty close, that's when you have to deploy it. If you deploy it when the bear's 100 feet away, it's not going to do you a damn bit of good. So as important as how you carry the thing is that you practice with it before you use it. Buy a dummy can. The dummy cans are a lot cheaper. You can get a dummy can for about $20 off of Amazon. Again, I use the counter assault stuff, and I got a counter assault dummy can, and I think I paid $25 for it. And I do this about once a year. It's just called an inert trainer if you're looking to Google one up and order one off Amazon. You can also get them from the counter assault people. Practice. That's the main thing I would do. And that's a nice segue into the next thing that I want to talk about, which is practice in general. You do not want to be showing up in a couple of weeks, whenever you're scheduled to start the tour. You do not want to be showing up and having, for the first time ever, used a GPS unit that you intend to use. You just got the Voyager Pro out of the box the night before, put it on your bike, loaded your bike in your trailer, and started driving to Idaho. You'd almost be better off without it if that's what you're going to do. Anything that you are going to use on the tour of Idaho, you should have already used a lot by the time you get here. The number of people that have hosed themselves by showing up with some brand new piece of equipment that they have not adequately checked out is the stuff of legends. Every year there's somebody that shows up and their PLB is not tracking the first day, and it's because they never used it before. They didn't practice with it. They got it out at the Hotel Malad the night before and started trying to set it up and everything, and that's not the way you want to do it. Take the stuff out, use it. If you want to understand why we recommend that Cascade Rescue Kit, go out and try to use a rescue kit sometime. It'll become very evident, as I mentioned a few Mondays ago, why we chose the Cascade Rescue Kit. Every time somebody tells me that you don't need all this stuff, you can do it another way, that is a person that has not used one of these things in anything other than maybe a free hang or something like trying to jack their bike up into a tree, which is the easiest way to do it. If you practice with that rescue kit, it'll do two things for you. The first is it'll show you why this Cascade Rescue Kit is a good kit. And the second thing is it will enable you to have some confidence while you're out there that this thing actually works. The worst place in the world to be trying to figure that out is the first time you chuck your bike off a side hill. You're going to be not feeling emotionally very calm in the first place. But if you already know the thing works, you know how to use it, you know it's not that difficult to use because you've practiced, when the time comes, it will help you a lot. It's going to make you feel a lot better. Look, few things on the tour are worse than chucking your bike off one of these monster side hills you're going to come up on. A lot of people call the Tour of Idaho the Tour of Sidaho because of all the side hills. It's starting about day 3 a little bit, but from day 4 on, there's some monstrous side hills that you got to ride across. And they just keep coming at you every day. And that rescue kit it gives you some confidence that you're not totally screwed if you launch your bike off a side hill. Now, some places they're treeless side hills, and there you're going to have a problem. But as Jeff Jensen talked about a couple of weeks ago, you can always dig a bollard or find a boulder or something with enough ingenuity. If nothing else, take your silky saw and drive the thing into the ground and tie off to it. There's always some way that you could use that rescue system to get your bike back up. And if it's a truly treeless side hill, a lot of times you can kind of just contour back up the hill and hit the trail or something. You may not have to deploy the rescue kit. So we talked about the bear spray, practice it. Knowing how to wear it is one thing, but having practice with it is just as important. Having used the GPS that you're going to use, having used the beacon that you're going to use. All of you that did practice rides and put your beacon track up so we could track it, you did a good thing because now you know that it works. A few of you found out that there were problems. I talked to teams that couldn't figure out why it wasn't updating all the time. Well, it's because you had it in your pack. It really needs to have a pretty clear view of the sky. There's all kinds of things like that you are going to discover if you practice with this stuff a little bit. Now, some other questions that I'm getting now, and it's kind of funny because I get these questions and my response tends to be to refer you to the place on the website where it addresses that question. And so then the next thing that typically happens is the people that did want to read it in the first place then start asking other people in the group, well, what do I do here? And I'm going to hear about that. So if the point in doing that was that he doesn't want to answer, so I'll ask somebody else, you're probably going to get kind of the same response from them. We want you to read this stuff. Because if you read it, if you put forth the effort to read it, you are much more likely to be able to wrap your mind around it at some point. So, navigation. This is perennially a problem with the Tour of Idaho. Again, all I and everybody else can do is put it out there that the ability to ride a motorcycle well in the woods is about 50%, if that, of the skill set that's required to successfully complete the Tour of Idaho. And a lot of times, people who are not the most skilled riders in the world have an easier time accepting that than people who are extremely skilled riders. A lot of times, our biggest problems come with people who are highly skilled riders. Now, there are some obvious exceptions to that. Holy Rollers last year, first-rate team, but that was the most prepared team that had ever come along. I've never seen a team prepare that hard. Jimmy Lewis was the same way. I mean, who's better than Jimmy Lewis at this kind of stuff? Yeah, that guy had great questions. He prepared. He had really spent a lot of time looking through the website and trying to wrap his mind around what's going on. The movie stars a few years ago. There was a Canadian team a few years back, a couple of pros, same way. So there are exceptions to that. But in general, what happens is we get people who have like a big race background and instead of like focusing on navigation, what they're focused on, the questions I get from them are, has anybody ever ridden all the challenge sections before? No, and probably you're not going to be the first. I've been wrong about things before, but it would take an awful lot of things would have to go right in order for that to happen. Usually the teams like that are smart, after a couple of days, they figure out, even if we could do all this, our bikes and our equipment might not stand up to the punishment. So maybe we should back off and just try to finish. The teams that aren't smart, they never get that. They go out, they crash, they break something, and then, the whole tour is over for them. But all I can do is tell you, and all anybody else can do is tell you, the most important skill is probably your general ability to function in the outdoors. And a huge part of that is navigation. Once again, the Tour of Idaho is about half being able to physically ride the trails, and the other half is being able to find where you're supposed to go. It's not always completely obvious. We don't give you tracks for a reason, and we've talked about those reasons ad infinitum, ad nauseum. They're written down. I'm not going to go through that again tonight because we've already talked about it. But I will tell you once again, there's a sound reason why we ask you to navigate from one waypoint to the next. Part of it is it's more adventurous, but part of it is there's a real good reason for that. It forces you to deal with navigation. You have to learn a little bit about navigating. You've got to have a sense of direction. You've got to be able to look at what's on your GPS and correlate that to what you see in front of you with your eyeballs. That's what navigation is all about. And that's part of this adventure, being able to find your way. A few teams so far have asked me questions that indicate clearly that that's not their plan, that they got a track from somewhere. Now, I discourage people from making their own tracks, but if you want to do that, that's not a disqualifier. If you decide that you want to make your own track, I've talked to teams that had perfectly rational reasons for doing it. I disagree with those reasons, but that's not against the rules. You can create your own track if you want. I've also talked to a few teams this year that it's quite obvious to me they got a track from somebody else, because the questions that they ask indicate to me that they really don't get navigation. So they got somebody else to create a track for them, or they got a track from a former team. Something that I asked last week or in several weeks ago, please don't share your tracks with anybody else. If you doing your own navigation is part and parcel of this. It's difficult for me to enforce, but if I find out for sure that you're using somebody else's data to navigate, that's a disqualifier. That'll get you DQ'd to heartbeat. You're supposed to navigate yourself. Part of that is understanding how GPS technology works. Look, Kent Annis wrote a wonderful thing, a tech article, which I think there's a link to in the forum somewhere. In fact, the whole thing may be on the forum, but you can find it if you look around a little bit about how GPS technology works. And Kent, if you're out there watching, go ahead and, if you know where it's at, go ahead and put up the link. But I know you can find it if you hunt around a little bit on the forum. Since you're going to be depending upon GPS so much, it might behoove you to understand a little bit what GPS technology is all about, what's good about it, what its limits are, how does a GPS unit work. A dedicated GPS unit like a Garmin or Voyager Pro doesn't work like the GPS in your phone. The chipset's different. It behooves you to understand all that. That's why we tell you do not use your cell phone as your primary navigation device. There's a sound reason for doing that. And if you investigate that a little bit, the lights will come on. We tell people have backup GPSs, and people say, well, why do I need more than one? Well, because two things, both bad for you, are going to happen if it craps out somehow. One is that we may have to send somebody to come and find you because you may not be able to figure out how to get out from wherever you are. The second is that you won't have tracks that we can verify. You may ride the whole route, but if you don't have tracks at the end of it, there's no jersey number. You did a T2, not a T1. So, redundancy in your GPS, understanding GPS technology, understanding something simple like the difference between a route, a track, waypoints, and track points. Waypoints and track points are not the same thing. Almost every GPS unit, every modern GPS unit that I know about has the ability to put an SD card in there, so you can create track points as dense as you want. Track points don't take up a lot of memory anyway because they don't have all the information in them that a waypoint has. So, you can figure all that stuff out in a couple of hours. Just read about it. There's websites everywhere. We have a lot of that stuff on the forum. And so you can read about it there, but you can Google that stuff up, and there's tons of information on the web that's good information about GPS technology and how it works. But since you are going to be so heavily dependent upon GPS technology, it would really benefit you to investigate it a little bit and figure it out. Also, by now, you should have gone through every single day of the tour. You should have looked at all those waypoints. You should have verified them in Google Earth. People keep asking me, look, is it okay if I have my own waypoints? It absolutely is okay if you had your own waypoints. In fact, it's encouraged. I don't think it's a very good idea to try to stitch them together and create a track, because most people that do that don't draw the track by hand. They use software to click it in, and I guarantee you that that software is not right everywhere along the tour. It's much better if you just say, look, there's a waypoint a quarter of a mile in that direction. There's a trail that's kind of going in that direction. I think I'll just follow the trail. That's better than when the red line goes off a cliff and you feel compelled to follow the red line off over the cliff, which happens a lot. I told you a story a few weeks ago about a few years back. There was a guy who created a big stink about this. They'd gone in, they cut some switchbacks into a hill. There had been an old trail that kind of went straight up the hill, and they went in and cut in some switchbacks. And this guy, and it was way up north. It was someplace that I hadn't been to in a year or so. And we hadn't used the trail for a while, and then we put it back on. And so I had the old trail on there. But it's really simple. If you're standing at the bottom of the hill or sitting on your bike at the bottom of the hill, you can see where the trail goes all the way up the hill. And when I got there a few weeks later, after this guy created quite a squawk about this, I'm sitting at the bottom of the hill looking up, and there's just clearly some switchbacks, and you can kind of see where the old trail used to go, but they erased it. You're going to find stuff like that everywhere along the tour. Well, this guy tried to, dollar sign the switchbacks, just ride straight up the hill, and he was all pissed off about the fact that I had misled him because there were switchbacks there now, and had he been paying attention to the fact that there was a waypoint at the bottom of that hill and a waypoint at the top of the hill, and what's in between doesn't matter, it would have been a lot easier for him. But that's what you run into. All along the tour, things change all of the time. And you're much better off just trying to navigate from one waypoint to the next, but you should absolutely put in all of the waypoints that you want. Add them wherever you think they need to be added. You make those files your own. Customize them all you want to. So, let's see, we talked about bear spray. That was a question that came up. We talked a little bit about nav. That was a question that came up. We talked about using everything that you're going to use. Another thing that I keep discovering is I find people against in bed. I like that. RAM mount for your Garmin. Absolutely. Dwayne, thanks for bringing that up. The RAM mounts are the best. When you're going to put if you're getting the Voyager Pros, we've said before, get the billet mount. That's the best one. If it won't fit over your steering damper, you can shim it, and it's real easy to do. But for your backpacking GPS, for your Garmin, the RAM mount is the best thing in the world. They're sturdy, won't get ripped off your bike. They're bulletproof. I love them. I've used them for years. Ride a fully loaded bike before you show up here. Here we go. Thank you, Jeff. There you go. So there's a lot of good information about GPS technology there, and I think that's on our blog somewhere as well. But Kent Aness is an expert. That's what he does for a living. He's a GPS guy, and his ideas and mine are remarkably aligned about how all this stuff works. And Kent is a fountain of good information about GPS technology, as opposed to the oceans of bad information about GPS technology that exist in the world. All right, so the next thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit in my sort of come to Jesus meeting here a little bit, I'm trying to look at some of the comments here. There's a whole bunch of them. Ride a fully loaded bike before you show up here. I'm amazed at the number of people that, their play bike is a little two-stroke or something. Like me, they have a 300 or they've got a 250 or something like that. That's their woods bike that they ride around in. But they're going to show up on the tour on some big four-stroke that they might have done a little bit of dual sporting on, but they've never ridden with a big tank. They've never strapped bags and stuff to it. Talk to Charles Rhodes. Talk to some of these guys that have pre-ridden day one and have done the whole thing. Mike Boughton, guys like that showed up with their tour bike with all their stuff bolted on it, and they rode day one. I happen to know that there are guys on that Charles Rhodes team, Utah. There's some pro level riders in that team. There are some solid riders on that team. And what I was getting from those guys via PM while they were out here was, whoa, this stuff is hard on a fully loaded bike. When I go out in my 300 and I'm bopping up Kent's Canyon and Robert's Roost, I don't have any problem with that stuff. And I'm an old guy with a bad hip. But you know what? When I go out there on a fully loaded tour bike, it's quite a different proposition. A friend of mine, Ned Cease, was talking about his Dakar bike to me a few years back, and he said one of the hardest parts about Dakar was how different the bike handled when it was full of fuel versus when it was getting empty. You know, those Dakar bikes will hold like 8 or 9 gallons of fuel, maybe more than that. And that's a huge difference in weight, way up high between when the bike's full of fuel and when it's not. You're going to encounter the same thing on your tour bike. You got a big tank up there, 4.5, 5 gallon tank or something like that. You got some of those giant loot bags on the back. The bike handles a lot differently when it's full of fuel because it weighs what, 20, 30 pounds more when it's full of fuel than when it doesn't. Yeah, maybe as much as 40, way up high. That's really going to change the way that bike handles. It's not going to feel like it feels when you're riding a little light two-stroke through the woods that only holds a gallon or two anyway. It's the same thing with all your gear. You're going to have to redo your suspension for the tour. You're going to be carrying a lot of weight, and if your suspension is not dialed to accept that weight, you're going to work much, much harder than you need to work on the tour. Some other things that you're going to learn by going out and trying to ride in your tour get up before you get here. You're really, really going to learn the importance of light clothing, of having gear that's versatile. You're going to learn the importance of having, of maybe not wearing as much armor as you think you ought to wear. Look, a bunch of the teams that pre-ran day one this year kind of got a little bit lucky because there've been a lot of cool days so far. We had an extraordinarily cold June this year. And so a lot of guys were out running when the temperatures were in the 70s. When you come back here starting this month and in the next month, the temperatures are going to be in the 90s or up near 100 on day one. And if you're wearing like a Climb tactical vest or something like that, or you're wearing I really like all that Liat stuff as well. I used to wear a bunch of that. Stuff will wear you out. You'll sweat yourself to death and all that stuff. You'll get to I've got an entire shop full of armor that Tour of Idaho guys have left and said give it to somebody that needs it. Again, you're riding at very slow speeds, or you should be anyway, if you intend to finish. You don't need to be doing 40 or 50 miles an hour going down these trails. It's not a race. You'll break your bike if you do that. Even if you can do it, your bike probably can't handle that for 10 days. So take it easy. When you get to the transfer sections, take it easy. But in my view, wearing a bunch of heavy armor is no bueno. And the only thing it will take to convince you is riding a day in extremely hot weather with all kinds of armor and maybe dark colored clothing over the top of it. You won't forget that for a while. And remember, after day one, you got day two, and day two's worse because there's no shade on most of day two. On day one, as long as you're intelligent, you know, when you pull over to take a rest, you stop in the shade somewhere. There's shade almost all along day one after first thing in the morning. You know, when you're coming over Oxford Peak, there's not a lot of shade there, but that's early in the morning. You don't care. Right after that, there's shade the rest of the day, just about every place. So you can always get in the shade when you pull over to stop. By the way, that there's something as simple as that. If you have pre-ridden day one already and it was at all hot, you will understand that on a 200-mile long day full of single track and kind of technical trail, when you pull over the rest, you need to like pull over in the shade and take your helmet off. Little things like that you're going to learn if you kind of practice with the stuff that you intend to bring. So again, I just don't know that I can emphasize enough how important it is when you show up here to have your navigation all dialed, to make sure that you've practiced with all of the stuff that you intend to bring. Don't bolt stuff onto your bike, load it on the trailer, then come here. That's almost always a mistake. Look, as much as I like recluse clutches, I wouldn't bolt one on the night before. Even though I use them all the time, I wouldn't bolt one on the night before, even knowing how they work, because it takes a little while to get those things adjusted just the way that I like them. I'd rather just use a regular clutch. Same with tires. You know, don't put on a tire that you have no experience with. Now, having said that, some of you are probably like me. Yeah, I worked for magazines for a while, and one of the things that I learned in working for magazines is I would kind of just figure out what the bike was going to do, and I would adapt myself to that. So my personal sensitivity to tires and things like that is really low. I don't care. I'll ride a motorcycle with any kind of tire it's got on it. I can tell the difference, but I'll just figure out what the bike does, and I will adapt my riding style to what the tire does. I'll try to do that with suspension, but that's more difficult because that's starting to involve some work and some really sacrifices in performance sometimes. But nonetheless, I don't care. But having said that, the guy who probably cares less than anybody who's a part of this conversation, which I'm pretty sure is me, Bald Eagle brand radial, as long as it'll hold air and it's round, I'll ride it. I've ridden motorcycles that had handlebars that were bent sideways for 50 miles. If the bike goes north, that's all I care about. But I know that most of you are a lot more particular about stuff like that. So make sure you practice with the bike set up the way it's going to be set up for the tour. If you do that, your odds of success once again go way up. For all of the really high level riders that have come through, for all of the excellent advice that you get, not from me, but from other people that have done the tour, the best ambassadors of the Tour of Idaho are the people that have done it, the people that are wearing these jersey numbers. Almost all of them are great people. They almost all give you great advice. They all tell you the same thing. Don't underestimate what's going on here. It's not what you think. But every year, people choose to ignore that advice. And when they do, things aren't going to work out. You're going to be disappointed. Things are going to go south probably. And that's when the piss and moaning and complaining starts. And nobody wants to hear that. So let's see here. Yeah, let me put this up. Carrie's got a good comment here. Holy Rollers all switched to and rode our fully loaded tour bikes for months before the tour started. Again, Holy Rollers were one of the most prepared teams that ever came through. Let me look at some of this other stuff here. Let's see what else. If anybody has got, let's see, what's this one right here? Yeah, just let's see. If that's the case, the internal memory may not be enough, but you can sure load them onto an SD card. Take a bunch of SD cards with you if you have to. I get all of them in mine, so I don't know what the problem is, but I managed to I've got the whole Tour of Idaho loaded up my Voyager Pro right now, and I've had the whole Tour of Idaho at every GPS unit I've ever had. I put the whole thing into memory, and then I put the whole thing onto an SD card, and then I load it into internal memory day by day. That's kind of my trick for doing it. So you don't want to try to put the whole thing into internal memory all at once. You might run out there. But you can certainly put it all on an SD card, and then just as the days go by, just load that day into your GPS unit. Again, that's kind of I don't know who asked that question. It's a great question, but that's sort of GPS 101 kind of stuff, which is why you want to spend some time sort of investigating how GPS units work. And look, everybody goes through that. I didn't know how GPS units worked when I first started doing this kind of stuff either. I spent 2 or 3 days figuring it out, and then I've tried to keep up with it as I've gone along. So it's not a bad question at all, but that's the way you manage it. Use an SD card, then load the stuff into internal memory as you need to. See what else we got here. All right. I want to see if there's any more questions, and if there's not, I may wrap it up a little bit early tonight because I can't think of anything else that we need to talk about. Tomorrow, first thing in the morning, I got to get up bright and early, and I got to go to Blackfoot, Idaho, where they're going to strap me to a machine and zap my kidney with electrical shocks to try to break up this golf ball sized kidney stone I got. So I may not be feeling pretty great for a couple of days, but the doctor, who, by the way, is a member of the Tour of Idaho community. So, Dr. Sewell, if you're out there watching tonight, take good care of me tomorrow, and your bike repair bills get a lot better. Dr. Sewell's a cool guy. He is a member of our community. He wants to do the Tour of Idaho one of these days, and I'm thrilled to know him. He's a super good dude. But he assures me that I'll probably be functional again by the time the first teams come through, and then I'm holding off on hip surgery until the last teams have passed through at least Pocatello. Next week, I might have a pretty interesting guest. We'll see. There's several people that are going to be coming through about that time, and we'll just see what comes up. But I ought to have a pretty interesting guest next week. So let's see if there's any more questions here. And if not, I'm going to bid you adieu a little bit early tonight. Thank you, Dwayne. Getting old is it's not for wimps. It just, it is what it is. You wear stuff out. And I've talked to a lot of you about this. By the way, I'm going to be just fine on all this. I really appreciate everybody PMing me and stuff, saying good luck and everything. My wife works at the hospital where I'm getting all this stuff done. The doctors are friends of hers, friends of mine. I'm in excellent hands with all this stuff goes on. I actually don't have any stress about this whatsoever. I've been hurt so many times in my life through a combination of climbing, skiing, and motorcycles that I am no stranger to hospitals and emergency rooms. So whenever I'm actually able to plan the procedure, it feels like a walk in nice tall grass to me. What else? Thank you, Mike. It's all going to be good. It'll be a little bit painful for a while. Everybody's told me that kidney stones suck when you start trying to pass them. And I can't say that I'm looking forward to it, but you know what? All of us ride motorcycles. None of this is for wimps, right? You go out and you strap it on and you do what you got to do. And it's the same way when you start getting old. What's the alternative? To be dead or to never have had any fun in your life? If you get to be my age, and several of you out there are my age, and you don't have any dings, you probably didn't have any fun getting here. So the heck with that. If you're going to get old, you better get tough. Yeah, whether you want to or not, that kind of goes along with it. About the only thing that I've ever done that didn't involve injury was playing guitar. So maybe I should probably start doing more of that. I don't know. All right. Thank you again very much for spending Monday evening. Bart, thank you very much for showing up. I really appreciate the fact that most of you appreciate meeting people like Bart in the flesh. And there's a growing kind of awareness, I think, in our community being spread by, again, the best ambassadors are the people out there that have finished a tour or have come close to finishing a tour. Meeting Bart, meeting Kaylin, meeting Donna, meeting Corey, who's probably going to be with me next week for a little bit. That's a big part of this. The people that you meet along the way are a huge part of the tour of Idaho. And they all dig the heck out of you guys. They think you're nuts, but they're proud of what you're doing, and everybody's impressed as all hell. People everywhere are cheering for you. But just please do all you can do right now to set yourself up for success. So get those doggone GPS units figured out. Again, it's all written down for you somewhere. If it's not on my website, it'll be out there somewhere. But figure all that stuff out. I don't want to see you fail because you couldn't figure out how your beacon or your GPS or something like that worked. Sort all that stuff out. Let's have a hell of a tour of Idaho season this year. There's a rumor that international borders may even open. I doubt that rumor's true. I think our European and Canadian friends are screwed, but certainly that would be joyful news if it did happen. But right now, Idaho is one of the worst places for new COVID infections. It's really getting, if infections are your metric of this whole thing, it's looking pretty grim. Mortality is, as in most places, relatively low. Doesn't mean it's not a problem, but it's not quite the problem as infections are. There are a lot of, it turns out, asymptomatic carriers of COVID, but that's a discussion for another day. So once again, thank you very much for joining me again Monday night. Sorry I didn't have enough for a full hour tonight, but we'll try to load up next week and see what we can do. Y'all take good care of yourself. Get excited because it's almost here. And for those of you who are new in this community, you won't get anything done for about 6 weeks because when we have the links posted up, by the way, there's a calendar. The links are in the forum and the links are on the Facebook page. If you search around for it, you can click on those links and anybody can follow the progress of tour teams while they're out. It's the car for poor people. It's the most awesome thing in the world. So I will see you all next Monday night. I hope I'm ambulatory. Take care. And again, thank you for joining me. Ciao.